In January 2014, the body of 18-year-old Heather Malone was found in the living room of a suburban home in Brookhaven, Georgia. An investigation uncovered the disturbing details of her obsessive relationship with high school coach Nathan Ellis. In the fall of 2012, Brookhaven High School was buzzing with excitement for the upcoming basketball season. Nathan Ellis, a 28-year-old with a bright future in coaching, was hired as the new head coach for the school's varsity team. He quickly gained the respect and admiration of both his players and the school community. With his natural leadership abilities and charisma, Nathan was able to connect with his athletes on a personal level, making him not just a coach, but also a mentor and confidant. However, as Nathan began settling into his new role, a particular student caught his eye. Heather Malone was a senior at Brookhaven and one of the school's star cheerleaders. She was beautiful, outgoing, and popular, someone who seemed to have it all, but beneath her confident exterior, Heather carried a deep sense of loneliness. Her tumultuous home life had shaped her into someone who craved attention and validation, and Nathan's kindness towards her became something she began to deeply rely on. Nathan's life outside of school appeared to be picture perfect. He had married his college sweetheart, Hannah, in a beautiful ceremony just a year earlier, in April 2012. Hannah was everything Nathan had ever wanted: supportive, caring, and understanding. She was a kindergarten teacher, known in the town for her warm and gentle nature. They had just bought their first home, a modest but cozy 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of Brookhaven. The couple dreamed of starting a family, and the house reflected their hopes for the future, with a nursery planned for the spare bedroom and a backyard they imagined would someday host a swing set for their children. Despite their outwardly happy life, Nathan struggled with balancing the demands of his new coaching job with his marriage. Hannah, while supportive, often found herself alone during Nathan's late-night practices and games. As the pressure mounted, Nathan began feeling conflicted about where to focus his energy, on his career or his relationship with his wife. Nathan Ellis, despite his success as a basketball coach, began to feel the weight of his responsibilities. The constant juggling of his professional life, his commitment to his players, and his marriage to Hannah proved to be overwhelming. In the beginning, Nathan had been excited about the prospect of becoming the head coach at Brookhaven High, but soon he realized that the job wasn't as fulfilling as he had imagined. The long hours of practice, the pressure to win games, and the constant feedback from school administrators started to take a toll on him. He spent more and more time away from home, unable to spend much quality time with his wife. Hannah, understanding but beginning to feel neglected, tried to be patient with Nathan. However, as the months passed, she found herself becoming more distant from him. Their relationship, once filled with excitement and mutual admiration, now felt more like a routine. Conversations with Nathan were often limited to small talk or about his work, and the emotional connection that had initially bound them seemed to dissipate. Hannah couldn't help but feel that something was missing from their marriage, but she didn't know how to address it without making things worse. On the flip side, Nathan began to feel torn between his marriage and his coaching career. While he had loved basketball since his youth, the pressure to perform and the emotional exhaustion were causing him to question his decisions. In his personal life, he wanted to be the supportive husband, but his growing distance from Hannah and his increasing stress at work made him feel like he was failing at both. Nathan was slowly unraveling, unsure of where he stood in his own life and feeling lost amidst the expectations of others. Heather Malone was the embodiment of a high school success story, beautiful, talented, and adored by her peers. At 17, she was a senior at Brookhaven High, an accomplished cheerleader, and the type of girl who could have any guy she wanted. However, behind the smiling exterior, Heather's life was far from perfect. Her parents had divorced when she was young, and her mother struggled with alcoholism, leaving Heather to fend for herself more often than not. Though she excelled at school and cheered with all her might, Heather's personal life was marked by a sense of abandonment and loneliness. She yearned for attention and validation, craving a sense of belonging that her tumultuous home life could never provide. She often found herself reflecting on the kind of family she wanted but had never had. This emotional void led her to throw herself into cheerleading, to be constantly surrounded by her friends, and to seek out the kind of attention that would affirm her worth. When Nathan Ellis arrived at Brookhaven as the new head coach, Heather saw him as someone who was different from the other adults in her life. He was kind, approachable, and showed a genuine interest in the well-being of his players. Heather, though initially viewing Nathan as a mentor, soon began to develop feelings for him. She was captivated by his maturity, his dedication, and the way he seemed to understand her pain without her needing to say much. He represented everything she longed for: stability, attention, and a sense of being valued. Heather Malone was a senior at Brookhaven High School, known for her beauty and charisma, but beneath that was a young woman who had never truly felt seen or understood. From a young age, she had been longing for validation, something she rarely received from her emotionally distant parents. She sought approval in many forms, from her peers, from her grades, and especially from the attention of adults around her. This search for validation led her to the one person who would ignite something she hadn't experienced before: Nathan Ellis. Nathan, though much older and her coach, had a warmth and kindness that set him apart from the many adults in Heather's life. Unlike others who seemed to see her only as a cheerleader or a pretty face, Nathan was different. He made time for every student on the team, and when Heather confided in him about her struggles, he actually listened. He would offer advice and encouragement, recognizing her vulnerabilities without judging her. To Heather, this was a rare gift. It wasn't just his outward good nature. Nathan carried a quiet strength that drew people in. At first, Heather's feelings toward Nathan were innocent admiration, but as she grew closer to him, those feelings began to shift into something more intense. She started to crave his attention, her heart fluttering whenever their paths crossed. Her thoughts lingered on him even when he wasn't around. It wasn't just his looks or his position as a coach. There was something about the way he made her feel seen, something she had been starved for all her life. In Nathan, Heather found the sense of worth she'd been searching for. As weeks passed, Heather found more excuses to spend time around Nathan, whether it was staying after practice to ask about basketball tips or sitting in the bleachers after school, hoping to catch him on a quiet day. Nathan, for his part, was focused on his coaching, but he could see the shift in Heather. Her conversations with him became more personal. She began opening up about her struggles with her family, her dreams, and her desire to be seen as more than just a cheerleader. Nathan, being the compassionate person he was, started to understand the emotional complexities behind her smile. In these moments, they shared many long, intimate conversations. Nathan offered his thoughts on overcoming personal obstacles, while Heather absorbed his every word, feeling a connection growing between them. She was drawn to Nathan's confidence, his patience, and his ability to listen in a way that made her feel important. The more they talked, the stronger their bond became. Nathan started to see Heather not just as a student, but as a person with depth and complexity, and though Nathan tried to maintain professional distance, he found himself becoming fond of Heather, enjoying their talks and the way she seemed to rely on his advice. As Heather opened up about her own life, her distant relationship with her mother, the emotional strain of growing up in a broken home, Nathan couldn't help but feel a deeper level of empathy for her. It reminded him of his own childhood struggles, and their shared vulnerability created an emotional link that neither of them could ignore. As Heather and Nathan spent more time together, their connection deepened in ways neither of them fully understood at the time. Initially, their interactions remained relatively professional, coaching and mentoring, but Heather's frequent visits to Nathan's office and their after-practice talks started to stray into more personal territory. At first, it was small things: Nathan offering advice on Heather's personal life, listening to her frustrations about school and family, while she confided in him about her dreams and fears. These exchanges were innocent, or so they seemed at the time. However, the line between mentor and student began to blur. Nathan, aware of the risks, tried to maintain professionalism, but Heather's vulnerability and growing emotional dependence on him made it harder for him to draw a firm boundary. She began seeking him out more often, lingering after practice or attending extra sessions, and he, in turn, found himself increasingly eager to offer comfort and guidance. There was a subtle shift from being her coach to someone she could rely on emotionally. Nathan's empathy, which he had always used to encourage and uplift his students, became a point of connection that unintentionally pulled them closer. On Heather's side, her feelings intensified. She admired Nathan for his attention and kindness, but she also started to see him not just as a mentor, but as someone who was emotionally available in ways others weren't. She was drawn to his charisma, his wisdom, and the safe space he created for her to express herself, but each small step they took toward closeness pushed them further across the line of professionalism. Neither fully realized they had crossed into dangerous territory until it was too late. The point where the relationship between Heather and Nathan crossed into uncharted waters happened gradually. It was an emotional shift that manifested physically: unintentional touches, lingering eye contact, and moments that stretched longer than they should have. After one one particularly difficult practice where Heather felt defeated and frustrated, she sought Nathan out for support. They ended up in a quiet corner of the gym after everyone else had left. In that space, their proximity to each other felt charged, the unspoken tension palpable in the air. Nathan, always careful with his students, tried to keep a safe distance, but in that moment, something shifted. Heather, sensing his hesitancy, took a step closer, looking for reassurance. She put her hand on his arm, a gesture of comfort that felt different, almost electric. Nathan hesitated, not knowing how to respond. His instincts told him to pull away, to remind her of the boundaries they should maintain, but instead, he stood there, caught between professional responsibility and a growing, undeniable attraction. The moment lingered longer than it should have. For Heather, it felt like an invitation, an acknowledgement of the connection she had been feeling. Nathan, although conflicted, felt something stir within him, a longing that had been building ever since their first conversation. They both left that moment unsure of what it meant, but they couldn't deny that the line between coach and student had shifted into something else entirely. Nathan was haunted by the moment, knowing he could no longer simply chalk it up to professional rapport. Heather, on the other hand, felt emboldened, as though their connection had evolved into something deeper. The affair between Nathan and Heather began with a quiet, almost accidental intensity. Their relationship, once confined to coaching sessions and casual conversations, crossed a line that neither had anticipated. It was a night after a big match when Nathan stayed late at the school to finish some work, and Heather, who had stayed behind to help clean up, ended up in his office. They were alone, and the atmosphere between them felt charged. The sexual tension they had both been trying to ignore had reached its boiling point, and it was as if a switch had been flipped. The first kiss wasn't planned, and it happened almost unconsciously. Heather, feeling vulnerable after the match, sought comfort in Nathan's presence. She stood a little too close, looked up into his eyes a little too long, and when she brushed her hand against his arm, it felt like an invitation. Nathan, hesitant at first, succumbed to the pull of their connection, kissing her back. The kiss, soft at first, quickly deepened into something more passionate, more urgent. It was electric, intense, and for both of them, it was a defining moment. What followed was a whirlwind of secret meetings. Nathan, despite his inner conflict, couldn't resist the allure of Heather's affection. Their stolen moments became a pattern, after practice, during lunch breaks, or late at night when everyone had left the school. The secrecy of it all added a layer of excitement, but also guilt. Nathan had to play the role of the perfect husband, coach, and colleague, while Heather pretended to be just another student when she was in public. But when they were alone, their relationship was passionate and all-consuming. They were fully aware that what they were doing was wrong, but the pull they felt toward each other was so powerful that neither could walk away. For Heather, it was a fantasy come true, a relationship with someone she admired, someone who made her feel special, something she had never experienced before. Nathan, on the other hand, was battling his own demons, torn between his attraction to her and the guilt of betraying his wife and everything he stood for. The affair became their secret, something that tied them together in ways neither could have anticipated. They both knew that if their relationship was discovered, it would have catastrophic consequences. Nathan's marriage, his career as a coach, and Heather's future in academics and athletics were all at risk. They could never let their secret slip, and this constant pressure of secrecy intensified the bond between them. For Heather, the secrecy became part of the thrill. The affair felt like something forbidden and exciting, an escape from the ordinary. She cherished their private moments, where she could have Nathan's full attention, even though it was always fleeting. She didn't mind the lies or the secrecy. It made her feel wanted, important. For Nathan, however, the weight of the secret started to feel suffocating. He had to lie to his wife, to colleagues, and even to his friends. Every moment with Heather became a careful balancing act of hiding the truth, all the while feeling the moral conflict eating away at him. The secrecy fueled their relationship, but it also created a growing tension. Every meeting, every touch had to be hidden. They constantly had to look over their shoulders, and the fear of being caught added an element of danger. For Nathan, there were moments of doubt. He questioned his own integrity and felt increasingly guilty about what he was doing to his wife. Yet, despite these internal battles, the affair continued, with both of them getting more entangled in the deception. As Nathan and Heather's affair progressed, Heather's feelings of possessiveness began to spiral. What had initially felt like an exciting, secretive connection began to turn into something more controlling and suffocating. She had always been independent in her personal life, but something about her relationship with Nathan unlocked an overwhelming need to claim him as her own. This feeling feeling wasn't just about her love for him, it was about a deep, almost primal fear of losing him to someone else. Heather's possessiveness started off small, subtle signs like wanting to be around Nathan all the time and becoming upset when he had to spend time with other people. If Nathan had to leave early after practice or attend meetings without her, Heather would feel a wave of irritation. She couldn't shake the thought that if he wasn't with her, he might be with someone else, and the very thought of another woman taking his attention made her feel anxious and threatened. At first, Nathan dismissed these behaviors as signs of a deepening connection, but over time, the possessiveness became harder to ignore. Heather began to question him more, scrutinizing his actions. She wanted to know where he was, who he was with, and why he hadn't texted or called her back immediately. She would subtly comment on the way Nathan interacted with other women, trying to make him feel guilty or uncomfortable, suggesting that he was too friendly with others or that he might be giving them more attention than her. This growing possessiveness was intertwined with jealousy. Heather started to feel like Nathan wasn't just her lover, he was a possession she needed to protect from anyone who might threaten that connection. She began to feel that if he wasn't showing her the attention she expected, or if he wasn't exclusively focused on her, he was somehow betraying her. Her need to control Nathan's interactions with other people became an almost obsessive force. If Nathan spoke to another woman at an event, even in passing, Heather would feel a sharp sting of jealousy. In her mind, this was more than just a relationship. It was about ownership. Nathan was hers, and anyone who dared to step into that space felt like an enemy. This possessiveness wasn't something Heather had experienced before. It consumed her thoughts, dictating her moods and behavior. It didn't matter that Nathan hadn't given her any concrete reason to doubt him. Her insecurity and fear of losing him clouded her judgment and took hold of her emotions, transforming her into someone she barely recognized. As the months passed, Heather's jealousy grew more intense and uncontrollable. What had been small, seemingly innocent feelings of insecurity turned into full-blown emotional outbursts. Heather's thoughts became consumed with the idea that Nathan might be seeing someone else or developing feelings for another woman. Each time Nathan spent time with others or interacted with his wife or colleagues, Heather's anxiety would flare up. Her jealousy began to consume her to the point that she would regularly check Nathan's social media accounts, trying to find signs of him talking to or liking photos of other women. When Nathan didn't respond to her texts or calls immediately, Heather's mind raced with thoughts of betrayal. Was he ignoring her for someone else? Was she not enough? These thoughts would spiral into jealousy, making her act out in ways that were both destructive and irrational. Heather would text Nathan repeatedly when he was busy with work or social commitments, demanding to know where he was or what he was doing. If Nathan didn't reply fast enough, she would grow upset, accusing him of being distant or uncaring. These messages were often tinged with guilt-tripping or veiled accusations. She'd say things like, "I see how it is, I guess I'm not a priority anymore," or "Why do you spend so much time with them? What do they have that I don't?" Nathan, caught in the middle of his own inner conflict, found it difficult to respond in a way that would calm her without feeling suffocated. The jealousy didn't just stay in private moments, it began to spill into their public interactions as well. Heather started showing signs of frustration when Nathan interacted with other women at work events or social gatherings. If he was speaking with a female colleague, Heather would find reasons to interrupt their conversation, giving a pointed look or making a passive-aggressive comment. She began to notice how Nathan smiled more when talking to certain women, or how they seemed to laugh more easily with him. Every small gesture seemed amplified in Heather's eyes, and the jealousy would bubble to the surface. The jealousy also began to manifest in more direct ways. Heather started controlling where Nathan went, who he spoke to, and how often they met. If Nathan tried to make plans with friends or attend social events alone, Heather would become upset, accusing him of neglecting her or preferring the company of others. Her jealousy seemed to fuel her possessiveness, and it became clear that it wasn't just about protecting their relationship, it was about her fear of losing Nathan to someone else. As Heather's jealousy escalated, it started to push Nathan away. He became increasingly uncomfortable with the constant scrutiny and suspicion. His every move felt like it was being watched, and he began to withdraw emotionally. The more he pulled away, the more Heather's jealousy intensified, creating a vicious cycle that only deepened their emotional disconnect. Nathan, though still physically involved with Heather, found himself feeling more isolated and distant from her emotionally, unable to satisfy the constant need for reassurance assurance, she demanded. The emotional turmoil of the affair reached its tipping point when Heather's jealousy finally reached an uncontrollable level. The constant questioning, the accusations, and the spiraling insecurity became too much for Nathan to bear. Heather, unable to contain her feelings, lashed out at him during one of their secret meetings. She had noticed Nathan talking to a female colleague earlier that day, and to her mind, it was the final straw. She confronted him with anger, accusing him of caring more about other women than her. She demanded to know why he couldn't just be hers completely, why he had to share any part of himself with anyone else. The confrontation was intense, with Heather shouting, her eyes filled with tears and rage. Nathan, drained from the constant emotional strain of their affair, tried to reason with her, but Heather couldn't hear him. The more he tried to explain, the more her jealousy exploded. She questioned his loyalty, demanded to know if he was seeing someone else, and accused him of being dishonest. She even hinted that if he cared for her, he would have no problem cutting ties with everyone else to be with her exclusively. Nathan, feeling the weight of guilt and exhaustion, finally snapped. He could no longer bear the emotional suffocation of the affair, the constant secrecy, and Heather's ever-growing jealousy. In that moment, Nathan realized that the affair was no longer just a physical connection. It had become toxic. The lies, the possessiveness, and the constant emotional chaos had destroyed the fragile bond they once shared. For Heather, the outburst was a desperate cry for attention and reassurance, but for Nathan, it was the breaking point. He knew that the affair couldn't continue any longer without more pain and destruction. Nathan made the painful decision to end it. He told Heather that they couldn't keep going down this path, that the relationship had become unhealthy and untenable. Heather, in shock and disbelief, refused to accept it. She begged him to stay, to work through the jealousy, and to promise that their connection could be repaired, but Nathan had already made up his mind. He couldn't keep living this double life, and he couldn't continue to be the object of Heather's jealousy and possessiveness. The affair ended in a raw, emotional rupture with no resolution. Nathan walked away, leaving Heather devastated, heartbroken, and furious. She had been unable to control her emotions or the relationship, and now, as the affair came to a crashing halt, she was left with the consequences of her jealousy and the wreckage of a love that had turned toxic. For Nathan, the breaking point marked the end of a chapter in his life, one full of guilt, desire, and emotional conflict. For Heather, it marked the beginning of a painful healing process that would take much longer than she ever anticipated. The affair, once a thrilling secret, had ultimately led to nothing but heartache and loss for both of them.